Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland, and it's 50 years since John Enoch Powell gave his infamous Rivers of Blood speech. So this is a video assessing Enoch Powell. So who was he? In case you don't know, he was born in 1912 in Birmingham, that's in the United Kingdom. He was the only child of two teachers, and so he grew up in a very bookish household. There wasn't a lot of money around, but that which there was spent almost entirely on education. He went to King Edward's School, which is the most illustrious school in Birmingham, and he was an extraordinary erudite child. One time he visited a castle in Wales with his parents. He entered a certain room and took off his hat. His mother inquired why he'd entered that room, and he said, "This is the room in which King Edward the something was born." I don't remember which number. So who would have known that when they were little? So he was a classical scholar, and he went to Trinity College, Cambridge in 1930. He was a boy of the most exceptional academic gifts. There'd be a 3-hour scholarship exam. He would leave after 2 hours and still come top. But he was such a prodigy, partly because he was extraordinarily diligent, and he did nothing else but study. He'd go to chapel, he'd go to his lectures, he'd write his essays, but apart from that, he would just read all the time, didn't play sports, didn't socialise, didn't join the Cambridge Union, which is a debating society, and had hardly any friends. So he was offered a fellowship, as in those who are very successful in exams get to then lecture at that college at a very early age. In those days, British academics seldom did master's degrees or doctorates. He moved to Australia, became a professor at the age of 24, the youngest professor in the British Empire, and he just missed being the same age as Nietzsche when he became a professor. Anyway, the Second World War broke out, and he returned to the United Kingdom to join the British Army. He'd been dead against appeasement, but apart from that, he was largely apolitical at that stage. So then he rose to brigadier from private. He served in a West Midlands regiment, I think the Mercian Regiment, because that was his area of England. So he was the most promoted soldier in the British Army at that time. He was in India towards the end, and he learned Urdu, and he wished to be Viceroy of India. But he really was a political naif if he didn't realise India was going to become independent very soon. That was crystal clear to anyone with a newspaper in the early 1940s. And then after the war, he started to work for the Conservative Central Office. And when he heard that the UK was agreeing to Indian independence, he was poleaxed, and he wandered the London streets all night. His mind was befogged. He was in a fugue almost. How could this possibly come to pass? And then he accepted it, and with his typical logical absolutism, he said, we must simply embrace this trend. If India is going to become independent, really the British Empire must be dissolved. It's all a nonsense. There's no point in continuing any longer. The United Kingdom cannot be a superpower like the Soviet Union and the United States, and must simply accept being a second-rate power, but an excellent one. The UK could try and fail to be a superpower, or could strive to be a second-rate power and be brilliant at that. So let's just grant all these colonies their independence immediately. And he also had nothing but disdain for the Commonwealth, which is a post-imperial organisation. Felt it was simply a delusion to make people feel that the empire hadn't really broken up. Anyway, he was soon elected Member of Parliament for Wolverhampton South West. He was a conventional conservative in some respects. However, he did say that there shouldn't be this Butskillism, this mixture between Labour and socialist policies, as in Butler and Gaitskell's policies. The Conservative Party ought to be truly a free market party, which was deeply unpopular in the 1950s. So when the Conservatives came into office when they were in office in the early 60s, he became Secretary of State for Health. And to fill the shortfall in nurses, he brought in a lot of nurses from the West Indies. So after the Second World War, there's considerable immigration from some Commonwealth countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere, India and Pakistan. And this is the first significant non-white immigration into the United Kingdom, and that soon provoked controversy. So the Conservatives were out of office in 1964. Powell was on the back benches, and in March 1968, he infamously delivered a speech in the Midland Hotel in Birmingham, which was trailed in the press, and he said this one would go up like a rocket, and he did not disappoint. And he said that we must be mad, literally mad, to be allowing in so much immigration. It's like seeing a country busily engaged in building up his own funeral pyre. And he quoted a conversation with an anonymous constituent saying this man said, "I won't be happy till all my children are settled overseas. If I had the money, I would emigrate." Why would this man emigrate? Because in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will hold the whip hand over the white man. So this person was presenting race relations in terms of racial conflict, and it absolutely doesn't need to be like that. Non-white immigrants to the UK in the 50s and 60s faced considerable racial prejudice and indeed physical attacks. A few of them were murdered. So this was inflammatory talk, and it was highly irresponsible of Enoch Powell to say this sort of thing, and he was quoting his constituent with evident approval. It's richly ironic, of course, that his constituents should gripe about immigration, yet want to become an immigrant himself. So there we are. Why was immigration so bad, Enoch Powell said? It wasn't for economic reasons. Incidentally, at this time, the United Kingdom had net emigration, more people moving out than were moving in. So it was from 1945 right up until the early 90s. And these people were often crucial to fill shortages in the labour market, particularly in the National Health Service, as Powell would know. Why shouldn't they be allowed in? Powell was partly saying it would bring about cultural changes, and it did. Doesn't need to be bad in some respects. That's desirable. But he also said because they are bad, their behaviour is bad. And he said that there was a woman in his constituency and she had excreta pushed through her letterbox. He was saying it was by immigrant children. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Lots of journalists tried to locate this woman. Many of them couldn't. Then some years ago, some people said, well, actually, we now know who it is, and the name's been published, and she died some years ago. I mean, that claim could be bogus. And even if it wasn't immigrant children, that is not typical behaviour for these people. Surely it's the behaviour is the problem, not the ethnicity, and white Britons do that as well. So Powell wanted to radically reduce immigration. He wasn't against immigration on principle, and he wasn't against it from the old Commonwealth. Put boldly, that means the white Commonwealth, that means Canada, Australia, and so on. So was it a racist thing from him? It seems like it was, and he wasn't against all non-white people coming to the United Kingdom. It was a numbers game for him, and he said if it was 10 or 100, that would be okay, but 100,000, definitely not. So he just claimed that these people were wicked, and now that is obviously a racist contention. To say that most or all people of certain ethnic groups are bad is a dreadful thing to say and bogus. And to suggest that white Britons don't do that is also a specious claim. And it went further. He not only wanted immigration to be radically reduced, he also wanted some of the immigrants to the United Kingdom from the new Commonwealth countries, such as, say, Barbados, Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and so forth. He wanted them to leave. But not to be booted out, but to be offered money to leave. And indeed, the law was passed to that effect. Very, very few people took him up on this. Well, this really made Enoch Powell's name. He was sacked from the shadow cabinet by Edward Heath, then Conservative leader. He was also dead against joining the European Economic Community, which later metamorphosed into the European Union. In 1974, Powell, he stood down from Parliament and he urged his supporters to back Labour, because Labour at that stage was committed to withdrawing from the European Economic Community. Now, in a very tightly fraught campaign, a very close one, that might have been enough to tip it Labour's way, and indeed Labour did get more constituencies than the Conservatives, though fewer votes. In 1975, there was a referendum. It was a post-factum one on the European Economic Community. Should the United Kingdom remain in or depart? And Powell campaigned zealously for a vote to withdraw from the EU. EEC, as it was at that stage. However, his side lost. He later joined the Ulster Unionist Party. He was elected MP for South Down. He served until 1987 when he lost his seat. But that was something the Ulster Unionists liked because it was a national figure and someone who wasn't just from Northern Ireland, someone from England who was on their side. However, that made them bitterly unpopular amongst the left in the United Kingdom. Powell's speech garnered him great fame, and some people adulated him, and dockers who normally didn't support him marched to the House of Commons. We want Enoch Powell, Enoch 4pm. He was lucky to be known mononymically. Who else has ever been called Enoch? And he received sacks of mail, most of it supportive, not very much wrathful, amongst left-wingers, particularly undergraduates and so on. He was reviled. When he went to speak at universities, he'd be barracked and it was difficult for him to even get inside the hall to speak. His daughters went to Cambridge and they assumed the different surnames that wouldn't be linked to their father. Anyway, I think Enoch Powell was deeply wrong for all sorts of reasons, and he damaged race relations severely. He also tarnished the name of the Conservative Party, though he wasn't a member of it after 1974. So immigrants are not bad per se. The great majority of them are good. Of course, one should have a sensible, selective immigration policy, not huge numbers. But what he did was to besmirch the reputation of immigrants. Well, what would be a better word? To defame them, really. And for a highly intelligent man, it's unforgivable. He can't claim the excuse of stupidity. He must have known what he was doing. When he died, Edward Heath, the former Tory Prime Minister, was asked for comment, and he refused to say anything. I suppose he was thinking, nil nisi bonum mortis. But there we are. That's Enoch Powell, a man of tremendous talent who wasted it really by embracing a distasteful cause. He wasn't against all ethnic minority people per se, not as individuals, and he would allow some immigration, but large-scale immigration he thought was bad. I suppose he was claiming that they just were wicked or something, that are just too alien. And he didn't accept it as a necessary corollary of colonialism.